What does Rust have to say?
I don't know, probably fucking spreading misinformation or some frame data fucking nonsense. I'd imagine is
Some
what's going to
nonsense,
happen.
man. Yeah,
How are you keeping, buddy?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Now, before we crack on, though, Resling, thank you so much for the raid, and GG's for earlier, brother. Let me do the shout out thingamajigger. There we go. My god, disgraceful. Eating while talking, but, Rust, buddy, what do you
Yo,
think?
damn. Where to start? Well, okay, so I hate it personally. I don't know if it's necessarily like a bad patch.
Okay.
It's just I just hate it. Is that fair to say? I feel like that's fair to say. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a certain degree of sense, I think.
there's things that I wish were different. Um, like the hyper armor being so fucking high is a little ridiculous.
Yeah, just a fucking smidge. It makes some interactions just like absolutely disgraceful.
Absolutely.
Where there's like no way to like counter it at all. It's kind of fucking insane. Let me just change the stream title here for a bit because I'm like genuinely curious. Chat Rust about at Rust Bucket. There we go. So I'm currently ambivalent on it. If I'm going to be completely honest with you, I really don't know what to think because number one, it's early days. It's like the first week. My
Yeah, true.
initial kind of thoughts are, what the
Yeah, that
fuck were
makes
they
sense.
thinking?
Yeah, no, for real though. Like,
Yeah,
what the fuck were they thinking? If they were thinking that they were trying to steal Gabri's mod, then at least take the cool parts of it, like the lack of pivots. That would have been great.
yeah. It's like it's so fucking weird, dude. Like
It is weird.
you almost lose aggression when you get a hit is kind of fucking insane to me. Depending on the kind, if you hit with an R1, you get like almost next to nothing out of it, unless you've a guaranteed poise break in the second one, or you have like, let's say, an offhand that either combos into it or is actually forces the other person to like reaction roll. That's like, what the fuck were they like? Why would you do that? Why would you not reward aggression with more aggression? Like I don't understand. But and then have the gameplay then be revolving around the other person trying to get counter pressure and then either resetting to neutral or aggressing themselves. Like why? What's the point of that other than forcing you to use another button afterwards? Because if you just R1 you get nothing, but if you R1 R2 and your R2 isn't dog shit, which is a dice roll with these fucking setups, what do you do
Yep.
then?
Yep.
What on earth?
Yep. You lose priority out of getting priority. It's fucking weird.
Like,
Like,
why? Why?
yeah, I think that was the strangest decision. If anything, like it would have worked better the way that DS3 did it, where roll poise exists, because then that would fix the issue of where backswings would be overtuned. Um, so like Shamshir, for example, has an incredible backswing that now does not poise break. So your prerogative after getting hit by a Shamshir is to mash into
Yep.
it. Like that's what you have to do. Um,
Ideally with a nest.
yeah, and same thing with an S stock, unless it's in the offhand, which is even more of a funny haha thing.
XD.
XD.
That's another thing I was been telling people. It's like if you're looking for more bullshit like that, look for things that share the R1, the first
Mhm.
R1, or L1 in that case. Like find the things that do that, and you're good to go. You've received Miyazaki's blessing to fucking L1 with impunity. So that's gonna be pretty funny. But so weapons don't really get priority out of landing an attack anymore, which is fucking hilarious. Um, what's how do you think this has like affected the meta? Like, how do you think this has like affected like people's decision making process when like picking builds and stuff? Or has it
Everyone's gonna
done?
use hyper armor.
You think everyone's going to use hyper armor?
Yeah.
Well, that fucking sucks.
Yeah, it's too annoying to try and deal with hyper armor. So the way to deal with hyper armor is to hyper armor yourself. And if that's through an Ash of War like Storm
Mm-hmm.
Stomp, or if it's through a two-handed, great weapon or whatever, I think that that's exactly what's going to happen. And I'll tell you why. It's because with PSSS you can mash out of it now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they changed the startup frames for hyper armor, but it feels like you can always mash out of hits done with hyper armor, and you will always get priority.
That's an interesting decision though, because that would mean that they're that the choice to like remove priority after a hit is like actually like a decision that they made. If that's the
Right.
case,
Intentionally, which is fucking weird.
because
But
one of
like,
the
and
go
then
on.
you have to space punish perfectly and not get locked up in the other person's hyper armor frames. Because if they R1 to R1 and you manage to not get that small window of time between the two R1s because
Uh
of
huh.
latency or whatever the fuck, because that's dependent on their side of the connection. Their hyper armor is on their side. If your lat is high, you punish properly on your side of the connection, then they are already in hyper armor frames on their side, so then they don't get stunned. GG correct.
That's fucking insanity. The other thing that's kind of interesting to me is, do you think that the so from playing the game a fair bit now for the last 2 days, I think maybe about 5 hours to the last 2 days, it's 6 hours now. Jesus, I need a life. Um, what I've kind of discovered is that an awful lot of setup seems to have been elevated. Um, the problem is it seems to be disproportionate where that elevation has been. That seems to be like the
Absolutely.
biggest issue right now. So like, what do you think that we're looking at the relative balance of the game? How are we feeling with the except we'll forget S stock for a second because that's a whole can of worms that we'll probably have to get into at some
Right.
point. But how do you feel like looking at looking at like
I
where the
think
balance is right now? Where do you feel we're at? Is it better than before or worse? I
Oh
guess.
no, it's so much worse. It's so much worse because anything that's fun to use is going to get countered by the few things that are actually really good now,
Mm-hmm.
and like so far above everything else that you have to prepare for it. So power stance spears
Yep.
is like the big one on probably everybody's mind. So how do you deal with power stance spears? Well, you fucking don't. But you can you can squeeze your harpy armor in between it. So you're gonna be looking at Ashes of War that can do that, spinning slash or storm stomp
Yeah.
or whatever else. And it's like, okay, well then on the other end, what do you do then? If somebody's gonna try and squeeze hyper armor between your attacks, you're gonna use some dumbass bullshit like fucking what is it called? Spin slash or storm assault or anything that gets around those kinds of issues.
That's
But
yeah.
then it's going to be the return of passive play where like everybody starts trying to space punish each other because the first one to take a move ends up being the one that hits done and they lose. Um, great swords, uh, great weapons in general need to be more aggressive. Um,
When you
but
what do you mean by that? Could you kind of explain a little bit more? Kind of what
they
I'm.
have, yeah, they have to force rolls. If they can't force a roll, then they're gonna get screwed. But staying on your back foot and waiting for the other guy to aggress when you have the great weapon is a bad idea.
Okay.
Unless or somehow you have the reaction speed to be able to punish a J alt one from straight swords on time. And good luck if you do.
Best of luck. Yeah. Do you think that they seem to be trying to do is to encourage you to use more of your move set? Like I kind of said earlier on with that hit stun. Do you think that that's going to be something that actually comes to fruition, or are we just going to see people hyper armor trading into each other forever? What's the do you for what seems the more likely option out of those two? Because they're the only reasons why I would imagine they've done things the way they've done things.
I think hyper armor trades are inevitable once you get past like half health.
Jesus.
Because like if you can win the trade, then you're gonna go for it. You're going to try and get the trade. And
Mm.
like I've poise traded with a standing R1 of a great sword into someone else's R2. What? How does that make any fucking sense?
So on the topic then of hyper armor, then seemingly is that's where we're going to ultimately end up, at least from our perspective right now. What are the weapons that you kind of want people should be keeping an eye on? Then I suppose what's on the menu first.
Probably Curved Greatsword. I mean, just because it's already annoying, it's difficult to space. It's hard to strafe, and with the changes to backstabs, it's easier to get a grab. It's not even that much easier, but like I've had some weird interactions where I got grabbed or I grabbed someone else, and it was like that's different. So I don't know exactly how the angle check is different. I like the pivot point previously was 90 degrees. So if they were able to turn and face you within over 90 degrees, then the backstab would fail. But I think now maybe it's around like 60 degrees in your general direction. So if they're able to pivot over 120, then they can get out of the grab.
Okay.
But it's hard to say. It's hard to say.
And on the backstab, then, do you feel that it's been appropriately buffed then, given the constraints of the game? Or because for me personally, from like the last like couple of days, what I've noticed is something to the effect of the angle check is considerably better. You're able to get those grabs that you could get before much more consistently. It's not quite as like, is it? Am I going to whiff it completely, or will it go through? Even on like janky latency, it kind of feels a little bit better on certain ones. But in terms of new setups that are backstabbed, I really don't think there's very much in the ways of an improvement. The tracking issues across the fucking board haven't been addressed, which are the real thing that are fucking up backstabs to a higher degree. Do you think that's, am I on the money with that, or what do you
I think you
reckon?
are. Yeah, I think you are. And I think that's why two-handed halberds won't be meta and two-handed lances, is because you can't straight backstab them.
Yeah,
But that's and then again, curved greatswords have that niche of not being strafable. And as long as you are forcing a roll, then it's extremely difficult to get a grab. Um,
interesting.
like you have to deficit them or they have to go for following a R1. I
Okay.
have had an interaction that was weird where I did an R1 with a greatsword. Someone rolled behind me. I rolled laterally and I got grabbed,
Sorry,
which
excuse me.
was
Could you
odd.
repeat that?
I rolled laterally, like to the side. So like if they're in front of me, they rolled behind me. I rolled directly to the side to try and escape the grab, and I still got grabbed. So that was a weird one.
Okay.
Um, so that's where the angle check is a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it was a weird backstab. I'll say that much. And it like warped me back into it. It was from a good amount of distance too, so I don't really know what
It
happened there.
could be some VPN shenanigans as well, because I'm not entirely sure what the is it, if it's host sided now, or if it is it host side, or the grabber side that actually like the person who's getting, is it the person who's grabbing or the person who gets the grab that determines whether or not the backstab goes through. I can't remember on
Uh,
off the top of
the
my
person
head.
who gets the grab. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so here's how it works. So
Yeah.
when in order to confirm the grab, um, the person being grabbed can't have pivoted past 90 degrees by the time that the person grabbing sees the animation complete.
Okay.
So if they pivot 90 degrees, by the time I, as the person grabbing, am able to get to that point in the animation that the grab checks of a confirm or
Mm-hmm.
not confirm, then it'll decide. But if you can swivel past that point, then it'll fail. But
Okay.
that's
Gotcha.
why a lot of times, like you'll turn and face the person, but the grab will happen anyway, is because that check is still technically on the side of the grabber, um, but your latency was high, and so therefore it swings you back around.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
it's a little bit different than Dark Souls 3, because Dark Souls 3 was basically like as long as you're facing away on the grabber side, then the confirm will go through, even if on your screen you've pivoted around before that point. It's just a little bit different, but it's enough to make a pretty significant difference.
Yeah, and again, given the ability for so many setups on Mash to just like immediately turn around if they're not out, if it's not a stam check situation, which even
Hmm.
then barely matters in Elden Ring, it can be still pretty unreliable. That's been my general takeaway anyway. The last little while that it's it's consistent across, like HTS stabs are much more consistent. You can land them. Halberd stabs on decent net is generally pretty easy to grab. Like that shuts down those setups real fucking bad. Um, if you call them out correctly. Like if they make a bad decision, they're kind of in trouble. So yeah, I think you might be right in that CGS. That makes a huge degree of sense. That would be something that's maybe the fishing arc of Elden Ring is a bit of ways, but okay, so we've kind of gone through the priority problem. We've kind of gone through backstabs. We've kind of gone through what the current meta. But like, what do you? Is there anything that you're enjoying so far that you think is kind of a good move in the right direction, or what's the consensus from the people you've been speaking to? How it's going?
I mean, like your sword and board is not a bad option right now. Because I mean, again, you lose priority, but
Mm-hmm.
if you block, then you can reset back to the first R1. It becomes a thing of if you're matched up against someone else that is using single hand weapon or a weapon that doesn't poise break on the second hit, then sword and board has a place.
Hmm.
And I mean sword and great shield. I mean like not some medium shield. Um,
Yeah.
'Cause you'll get guard broken. But I don't know. Actually, parries could actually work out pretty well here, at least against the mashing crowd, which tends to be a huge phenomenon right now. But it's even weirder still though, because like you can't get a stun on somebody using a greatsword. Like you can't trade. Trades
Mm.
no longer exist on greatsword to greatsword.
What you mean by that? Could you
Like
elaborate a bit more?
yeah, so like when two greatswords hit each other,
Mm-hmm.
they neither of them stun. They both hyper armor through.
What?
Yeah. Have you not noticed that?
I haven't picked up a greatsword because it's cringe, bro.
Oh, it's fucking stupid. That's why I'm saying that this is like leaning toward hyper armor meta is because they can't stagger each other. They just keep mashing, and no one wins. So whoever has the health advantage or the better defenses wins.
That's so stupid.
Yeah, Black Sheep said it too with Shunter's the same thing. It's fucking weird.
So actually speaking of Shunter, how's Shunter doing with the buff, the hyper armor buff on top of like the more consistent backstabs? What's
It
the
has to it has to crouch cancel.
It has to.
Well, yeah. I mean, you. I guess not actually. You can just R1.
Huh.
I don't know. That's a weird one. The problem with the follow up R1 though is that you can parry it if you ever go for it out of hit stun. So like if it I was testing this the other day. It was really bizarre, but if you get stunned by a shunter and they
Mm-hmm.
do a neutral R1 immediately, then out of hit stun you can parry it.
That's pretty funny. It's actually
It's
pretty
it's
funny.
hilarious. Crouch cancel or just a regular R1 you can parry it
Okay.
consistently if they just mash it. But so I don't know. Against small weapons, they have a really hard time. Uh, I just got my ass kicked by one just a minute ago when I was
Mm-hmm.
using PS Cats because I couldn't space out the jumping R1.
Yeah,
That's a skill issue
I
on my
feel
part.
I feel I no. You call them a laggard. You then call them a stream sniping
Exactly.
piece of
No.
shit,
Exactly.
and then you carry on with your
Exactly.
day. That's just basically how it works. But yeah, it's this. What do you think? What do you think is the top setup right now? Then what's that's the top
Off stock
triple
conserve
S
X.
tier
Off stock.
off stock 100%.
Yeah. I mean, like off stock, and then you put something else that has a hyper armor buff to it, or like fuck it. Do do katana with spinning or not spinning slash with sword dance and off stock, and watch what happens because it's really funny. Spinning or sword dance will poise break the hyper armor of a great sword, and not get poise broken itself. Even though a fucking normal ass great sword can't poise break a great sword. It makes no sense. It's so stupid. Um, no, what's better? The dragon halberd. The dragon halberd's going insane right now.
Yeah, it does because, and as well as that, because everything more or less poise breaks on it. You get the
Uh-huh.
full combo off, right? That's
Yep.
I'm not insane.
Yep.
Oh my god.
Um, Blocking has become really strong now. I actually wouldn't be surprised to see shield poke come back, like a like a spear, lance with fingerprint and barricade shield,
What the fuck?
because well, that would deal with so many different setups that are right now working very very well. which is the hyper armor meta of I'm just gonna mash my face into you because that's all I know how to do right now, and then like you can't strafe it, so good luck. It poise breaks every time, so like you don't even need the great spear for the stamina cost. It's you just shield poke with a spear or even a fucking clean route, whatever.
I did bleed. Semantrix says I did bleed Pike with offhand axe. That sounds pretty funny. That's insane. Like,
Honestly, yeah, the Pike on its own is just kind of nuts. I don't know. I could see the meta going in that direction too, where it's like Pike off stock is also really strong. I was doing that earlier just to see what it
Jesus.
was like, and it was absolutely stupid. Because then you can also do Storm Assault on that too, which is now a guaranteed full combo poise break. And the only way that you get around it is if you hyper armor with a weapon of your own.
So obviously, certain builds are going to benefit more from having access to those multi-hit Ashes of War options. Is there any? Is there any in particular? And what like status do you think is that they're most useful on right now? Because bleed is looking real fine right about now, given that it gives you that burst. Or frost as well. But
Frost is nuts.
what's the optimal one do you reckon for those multi hits, and what do you think the build is going to look like around that?
I don't know. Everything's weird right now, but I've been noticing that cold is doing very well.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know about bleed. At 125, it's hard to get a bleed build to work on things that don't have innate build up. Um, but I could see something like even a flamberge do fairly decently, just because it can now just swing to your heart's content.
I think another one that's going to be quite problematic is, of course, Ripple.
Oh, dude, Ripple's insane.
Like if it wasn't bad before, it most certainly is now. Having
Yeah.
whatever status you want pretty much automatically proc on that weapon art is just going to be bonkers. I'm not. I haven't fought many of them so far, but that's looking absolutely horrific.
That is true.
Add an off stock
Yeah.
onto that, and there's no reasonable human being that's going to try and strafe backstab that or anything along those
Nope.
lines. Ripple has the
Yep.
warped axe backswing. Yeah, there you fucking go. Ripple, double ripple, sleep on both, and just go to town.
And you
Oh
can't
man,
strafe the standing R1 of Ripple either, just because it's it's stupid, and I don't know why you can't, but you can't. Or at least I can't. Maybe skill issue. I don't know.
it could be a latency problem as well. Keep in mind, like high lash trying to strafe anything, especially on PC, is is a horror show. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's Is there anything you like out of the patch, Rust? Where are you at right
PS
now?
cats
And
are fun.
hmm,
Yeah, PS cats are fun. I've been running around with those. They're silly. I can just space out, get my first L1 to poise break every single time, so I never have to worry about it. And then I can just roll catch for days with Unsheath, and they don't know what to do. So they keep rolling, and I keep roll catching with Unsheath.
so
Yeah.
I guess the last question, maybe the light at the end of this godforsaken fucking tunnel, um, is do you feel that there's been setups that were before completely unplayable and just insta lost versus anything? Do you Because from my perspective right now, it seems that most setups got buffed pretty significantly by this poise change. Whips, for instance, went from being why on earth would you ever use them all the way up to pretty damn usable now if you have in conjunction with something else.
hmm
It feels that this is that patch where everything gets raised up. Do you think that that's kind of I'm on the money with that one, or do you feel that it's like
As soon as everybody starts using stuff that's dumb, no.
okay,
But
no, okay,
there's such a massive space between like something that's a fun setup, like I don't know, hand axe for example. Hand axe is a good example, or even shield sword and board.
mm-hmm,
If you put that up against power stance spears, you're not getting anywhere with it.
yeah,
And that is the thing that went far and above everything else in this patch. Same with power stance straight swords. They're also nuts, as I'm sure you've seen.
mm-hmm.
Because there's no downside ever. You just press the button. The only time that you have a more difficult time is if you're fighting somebody who likes to swing a lot with hyper armor and they're latent to you. But as soon as you have a good connection to someone that has hyper armor, then it's not really that big of a deal. Um, you throw in Storm Stomp and then you call it a day.
GG, man. So I think the takeaway then at the end of the day, more or less, is that they may have elevated a bunch of setups, but their relative balance now is would you say it's further than it's ever been, or do you think that it's taken on a new flavor more so than anything else that
It's
we've just?
just different.
Mm-hmm.
It's just different because like it's so fucking weird. Like you can get away with using hyper armor and just crutching your ass on hyper armor and it'll fucking work. Um, 7 times out of 10 or whatever, right? Or 5 times out of 10. Um, just because again, the other guy loses priority as soon as they make a swing. That other guy has every opportunity to get a hit in and not get punished for it, but it's you can't maintain that pressure. So I think it'll become a more and more passive meta as people start learning, oh, I can't keep swinging, I have to back off.
It's kind of
It's
reminiscent to a degree, I would imagine. It's like fighting Uggs in DS3. One of the things that you generally speaking do is you'd hit, force them to roll, pre-space out the rolling attack, and then move back into pressure.
yes,
That's kind of how I foresee the meta kind of going to regain it, unless you have an offhand. And that's kind of huge. If you have an offhand, you can reset it, get that little bit of chip in, so that if they try to roll now, you have again the poise break immediately right after that again. And I think that that's going to
exactly.
be another one for people who enjoy the lighter weapons and aren't big fans of hyper armor. I think that's going to be the play, and that is much slower than what we had before. Much slower. I don't know. I'm pretty concerned. It's too early to say right off the bat, but I think the concern as is pretty warranted. I really don't know. I'm bamboozled, to be perfectly honest with you, by this patch, and I think that's the
Also,
general vibe.
massive nerf to daggers.
Yes, which I'm not sure if that's necessarily a bad thing.
I'm not so sure that it is either, but it's just something to point out. Daggers now are complete fucking garbage. They work really well against the things that they already worked well against, which is like if you're fighting Uggs, then you just offhand dagger swipe them in between each of their hits and you win. GG.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it just is outclassed.
Yeah, there's better. Well, I mean, S stock for or clean rot or insert rapier
Yeah.
here is obviously going to be the top pick for pretty much everyone for the foreseeable, unless that's hot patched. Which, again, I
It needs to
stress.
be. It's not gonna be. Okay, here's the thing. I don't think it's gonna be patched
Hmm.
because I think that they'd have to rework the system of how the follow-up attacks work with S stock.
Because it's tied to the animation, right?
Uh-huh. They'd have to rework the weapon, and I
S
don't think that they're going to do that.
point blank S stock backswings also stagger, meaning you could. Oh my god, the fucking possibilities on this one are just disgusting, dude.
So here's something really fun to try.
Mm-hmm.
Have somebody roll around you in circles and
Mm-hmm.
try and find a way to get priority against someone who's using a sword and offhand S stock, and they will never be able to hit you because you always have priority. You R1 L1 twice, R1 L1 twice.
That's so stupid, dude.
Or actually, it was I literally did it with a katana, and it was R1 L1 R1 L1, and they couldn't do anything. They rolled around in a circle, and obviously, like rolling around in a circle is never a good idea. But you can't get out because the issue of the flawed backswing doesn't exist when you have an offhand S stock that does 108 poise damage.
Yeah.
Um,
Like S
yeah.
stock was strong before, right? Did they? We can. I think dissecting the S stock problems or the clean rot problems or again the rapier issues, especially in the offhand, is that it has insane tracking first and foremost, right? I don't think either of us would necessarily disagree with that in particular,
Yep.
right? It's pretty bonkers. The fact that it more or less goes 180. If you L1 in range, if they try to strafe, they're just going to eat a bag of
Hmm.
dicks, and that's just the nature of the beast. But the other funny is that it has that backswing as well, so you get double hits basically off it, almost guaranteed. It has true combos into things, meaning you can reset them that way.
Hmm.
Um, Offhand S stock is just insane. And given that everything now, you have to reset the attack chains. If anything has good frame data, any good cancels, especially as you were saying, what you were saying here as well in terms of like hyper armor, it's like you could just swat them aside forever. They can't do anything. They can't aggress on you. They can't really win neutral because of the stock. Like they're just fucked
Hmm.
completely. And it was already overrepresented in terms of making things better. It's like literally nuts.
Yep.
I just want to address something in chat though. Is Amelia, no poise in the offhand S stock meta, literally DS3. No, because in DS3 you could strafe stock. It became a mind game more or less. Stock was like strong in terms of like it was difficult to, if they blended the animations, it was difficult to roll. Um, and they could always call it out with a backstab and some means of critical, which there were also wake ups in the game, which meant that there was a viable reason to go for backstabs. Um, so I wouldn't quite go that far. There was a significant disadvantage to going for a stock L1, even though there were huge advantages. But you know that's now it's just that there's no downside to it at all. It's kind of insane. But I don't know where what else there is really to say on the S stock other than please for the love of God adjust, if they can't adjust the the animation, at least address the tracking at the very least.
That would be nice. I would love to be able to strafe that. But yeah, I don't know. As far as meta and where it's gonna go, I think that off off stock is obviously like you can't get past that. That's gonna be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Howard off stock or CGS off stock, whatever. Fuck it, even Uggs off stock so that you can get hyper armor.
Yep.
Um, but if if that gets fixed, then there's still other issues going on here, which is power stance movesets.
Yeah, that's kind of nuts that they didn't even touch that, or they didn't foresee touching that. That's kind of wild to me, to be perfectly honest with you. Um,
Yeah, I'd be really curious about power stanced curve swords.
I tried them. They're
Oh
strong
yeah.
because they hit like a truck. Obviously, I mean
Yeah.
they were always kind of like they had issues with a lot of things, but people now want to trade a lot,
Yes.
and you can
A
just
lot.
melt them. Um, you can literally just see the health bar disappear. I still think they're all outclassed by a fairly strong degree by PSSS, but
Hmm.
PSSS right now is just kind of fucking insane, which it in turn is also kind of outclassed by PSS, uh, Power
Right.
Stat Spears. So I really don't know. I'm just bamboozled, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah. So like the shear has the advantage of being able to pressure out a neutral,
Mm-hmm.
and power stance straight swords are more of a whiff punishing tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are good for space punishing, but trying to aggress your opponent is always really difficult with PSSS.
Mm.
Or yeah, uh, PSS has an easier time with that because they can just fucking run you down and
Mm-hmm.
also space punish at the same time as they do it.
Yep.
It's just so fucking long. But that's where I was wondering about the curve sword because you could just run R1 and then follow up L1 to get your poise reset or like your poise break reset.
Yeah. So I've heard as well.
Yeah.
There's been another thing that people are. They obviously the theory crafting is rife right now. How are in the overall scheme of things? How are PS Cats doing? Like, what's how are the kitties doing?
I'm having fun with them, but I don't think that they'll do very well because they can still get outmatched by PSS or PSSS.
Mm-hmm.
PSSS just smashes into them and they win.
That's pretty funny.
Um, you don't have the standing neutral pressure. You have to whiff punish. Um, I didn't check the frame data on the run attack though, but I felt like each of my run attacks, like the running R1 or running L1, excuse me, running L1,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't poise break on the first hit. which is
Okay.
bad. But you have the running R1 to be able to poise break, and that's fairly decent. I don't know, they're weird. It's kind of the same issue as the one-handed weapons, where after you attack, you lose your priority, you have to back off and space punish.
Mm.
So like what I've been doing with them is either space punish with crouch L1 and then space again and unsheath, or I'll like fake an unsheath, do another one with crouch cancel, and then get the roll catch. Because I'm like baiting the roll, right?
Mm.
Um,
So
and you can do it that way. It trades really well,
we have
but
confirmation
yeah,
here from Amelia that 21 poise damage on first hit running L1.
yeah,
It seems to be the idea. Which I mean, fists are having the exact same issue, right? The first hit in their
hmm
chain on two-handing the fists is kind of garbage now, but that's been reshuffled, and it seems that claws are eating good at the moment, which is
really.
terrifying. Yeah, I had a play around with claws there just before you came on, and I have to say they are, what's the word I'd use? Scary. Very, very scary.
I mean, claws can melt in like 2 seconds, right?
Yep, and they have
So
really good aggression tools now that they guarantee that poise break. So I think Vale gave me that one, and Cragblade. Cragblade on top of that means that they do damage, my friend.
mm,
It's kind of scary, but I think another
look into
setup
it.
that's been very funny the last little while has been twin blades. Weirdly enough, twin blades seem to be another one that's eating quite good at the moment. Put Cragblade on them, and they are doing some work again. Run R1, run R2 into mash is just kind of insane. It's again giving me
Mm.
very much Bloodborne vibes as it stands right now. It's kind of a little bit crazy. But I don't know. Is there anything else you've seen that's really shining this patch that wouldn't have been on the radar before? I guess now is kind of the time.
I mean, there's the Ashes of War that I think are on everybody's mind, like Black Flame Tornado and Stormhawk Axe. They're all stronger. I got full comboed from a Stormhawk Axe of just like not even just the first L1, but then the following L1. I couldn't roll
Oh
out.
my god. Yeah.
So like they can do the first part and then mash it again, and it will still combo.
Jesus.
That could have been skill issue. It could have been, but I don't think it was. I'm pretty sure that was a full-on combo from start to finish.
Interesting. Interesting stuff. And yeah, those again, we're kind of back to those weapon arts and stuff like that that are able to enable just like insane hyper armor on top of having like multi hits are going to be very very strong right now. Very very strong. I'm kind
Yep.
of I'm going to be watching very closely to see what the top picks are and what builds are people are rocking on them. Um, that's going to be something
Another
that's
great
put in the.
potential sword dance. Again, sword dance is very, very, very strong right now, which is
Yep.
weird to say. You can strafe it. You can strafe it really easy, but at the same time, if somebody mashes out a hit stun, which they all do right now, then you have a free combo.
Jesus. Yeah,
And it poise breaks great weapons, so
I was having a grand old time. Apparently, I was skipping on his screen because, of course, you know Cali I mean Cali Laggards. But in fighting Good Day earlier on, what the thing was, they try and follow up with the sword dance after, and I just ug poked them out of it, which was pretty funny. As soon as they
you
try
know,
and set it up.
I fought Good Day, and he was skipping really bad on my side too. I have ping filter on, and it was showing me that he had 0.35 of consistency, but like 20 ping, and he kept spiking up to 500. So I don't know what that guy's doing,
You know what?
but
Good day. We haven't heard here from the analyst desk. You are in fact a laggard, so cope harder, honestly, and to have your accusations of my immaculate connection not be worth keeping in mind here. But Amale, the filthy red, has asked the question here. Which is, this is all fine and good, but are flails finally viable? You are the expert here.
unironically, unironically, they beat Mash, so they're not bad.
Hyper armor,
And
right?
they hyper armor and they can't be parried, which is right now something that will pop up because a single straight sword isn't that bad, at least on the first hit. So if you have sword and board in front of you, then pull out your funny flail and make them eat shit.
That's pretty funny. So yeah, it
Like
seemed.
it's the best thing to answer. Sorry, I keep
No,
interrupting
no,
you.
no, you're fine. I hear a pause and I just immediately think, oh, my turn, my turn. No, but continue, please. After you.
I was just saying that after if you start encountering these single hand weapons that are, typically poise breaking on first hit, then flail's your best option because the other options are too slow. And the other option would be Uggs, um, to deal with sword and board that potentially has parry on it.
Interesting, interesting. I think JM's going to be joining us, someone who has a very different perspective, and I think that that's going to be quite useful. And again, I want to stress to people, but both the pros and the people who are pro this current change and those who are against it, that it's very important to listen to varying perspectives right now. This is a video game where there's an awful lot of means of interfacing with the systems. So I've seen it on. Gabri was pretty disrespectful when he came into the current tryhard community, which I think is a problem. And I've heard an awful lot of people shitting on other people as well, for some of their takes. So I think as of right now, being a little bit more respectful around this is probably the play. I have my own feelings and I have my own kind of ideas around how the meta is going to develop, but it's very early days and it's very hard to tell. And speak of the devil, and he shall appear.
Ah, yeah. Howdy. I
Yo, JM.
slept this time. Before I was starting to get real delirious when the patch came out. I remember. I was in a call. Hell, even Dodd was there, and I was talking about how we were talking about, oh, new patch dropping. Whoa, that's crazy. I guess the people who were assuming that it was coming were right. I on record said that I didn't expect much from a patch of this size. Like I wasn't holding out hope for anything. It honestly felt to me like it was going to be small, and I was half true because that patch note list was small, incredibly vague even. But the stuff that they did changed the game in a very specific way that PvP minded nerds from invaders to duelists will notice right away. PvE minded nerds, no, but especially if like they're one and done cooperators, not the full on gankers we're talking about here in the shitters, but people who are actually like trying to help their friend through the game. They probably won't notice anything because they have the blenders to deal with invaders with. They won't notice that, oh, this small little straight sword is stopping their full goat's friend from doing anything. It might be alarming, but then their host in the back is going to shoot Stars of Ruin or whatever. For us though, I just spent the last 5 hours streaming and playing the game from invading, and I came away from that experience extremely positive because that changed two things. It changed how interaction. I'm sure y'all are already aware, but this changed interacting with people when you're in somebody's face, when you're in range of L1s, R1s. What does that look like? What does passive poise do? It flipped passive poise, turned it on its head in such a way that the past power stance poise stacking meta needs to rework all that they're doing in order to make up for these stuns that happened on first hit. And perhaps most importantly, Ashes of War also gaining that benefit. So what I noticed since I invade, and more often than not, I invade with extremely unoptimal, non-min-maxed builds, but themed builds. Like earlier, I was invading as like a Lendel soldier that had the Lord-sworn greatsword. And I came across a host, level 40, who big shocker, wanted to stand in one place, rune arced up, and bust out a thrusting sword just to poke you when he noticed that you didn't have poise anymore, and then would actually switch to two frost partisans, dual spears, when that wasn't working. And I found out something incredible because now, even though Storm Stomp does stop you dead in your tracks if you don't have like the adequate poise to do it, especially passive poise, active poise, aka hyper armor, whatever you choose to describe it, is now way more important in tanking something like that. Because my answer to them spamming Storm Stomp, once I conditioned them to keep doing that, stamp, uppercut, and sent him flying into the air. That's all I needed to see. He rolled away, panic rolling, surely shaken by the fact that his little that pea-sized brain that likes to be a rune-arced level 40 host out in the middle of buttfuck nowhere got sent up into the air and rocked his world. But that was level 40. Of course, I'm not going to kill him with that move. We have under-upgraded weapons. We're just tickling each other at that range. But now I think of the implications, right? That this is why you now see people. Now you see people use. Just earlier, I was listening to y'all. Stormcaller, especially Thunderstorm on her axes, Nefeli's axes, the Stormhawk axe. I've heard people talk about Storm Assault. This patch did not change L2 Ring. Like, this is still very much Ashes of War, the video game, but now it's become more concrete what you're responding to. So if somebody is using Storm Stomp or Stormcaller, do you have an Ash of War answer to that? Or do you just wait it out? Do you try to, like, get around it? Or perhaps most importantly, now we have to test and see how poise works for hyper armor. Because can you hit somebody who's storm calling with like an R2 on a colossal sword? Like can you do that and you go through it? Like, is that possible? We'd have to see.
So one of this is kind of where we're for context, I suppose, because it is worth addressing the perspectives that we're all looking at this from. The perspective that I look at it from is if people are trying to min-max within a system, what is that effect? Because it's all a metagame at the end of the day. Even the base game itself is a metagame in some way, shape, or form that has rules, and you look at ways in order to basically either break them or skew them in your favor. That's the entire game. It's all video games. It's any system that can be interacted with. So when I look at the current changes and I see that hyper armor now is more or less a necessity in terms of everything, and in some things, the conversation we said myself and Rust had earlier on, wherein it's basically going to become trade city forever. Not that hasn't changed in terms of two claymores claymoring each other till they can't claymore anymore. That doesn't scream fun for me. The gankers are going to be trying stuff like that. They're going to be stacking their hyper armor as much as they can. The tryhard duelists are going to be doing the exact same thing. So that's kind of the concerns that I have in all of this. Apparently it can ground controls, which is why I'm bringing it up. Because the hyper armor economy is a little bit skewed right now. By a little bit, I mean very. So kind of when we're talking about the game, we're very much addressing it from the perspective of not can I use this, it's should I use this?
Yeah. Ultimately, at the end of the day, like you're saying, from the pre-patch meta with passive poise and power stance to now the emphasis on hyper armor through everything. These are two different variants of the playground and how you play. Two different types of fun that, to a lot of different people, they didn't find the passive poise of the yesteryear all too much fun, even with all the changing that they did. Like, they were very meticulous and like, this should do more poise damage, this should have more poise, and now they just said, first attacks change, hyper armor more important. Like, somebody said that how hyper armor is now felt like how Dark Souls 3's poise system hyper armor worked at launch, and it does sort of feel that way, especially since they remarked that a Claymore R1 can hyper armor through a Claymore R2. Maybe it shouldn't be that way. Maybe, there should be some moves that you do if you're doing a Ditto match that are just the better move in that situation, and not just let hyper armor take over. But it is at least an answer to what was there before, which was just dual lances or dual straight swords, or dual spears. Even I've been fighting some, like, coming across some phantoms that had like dual spears, for instance, and I'm just like, oh, stop that. Like, I whack them away. I'm not fighting I haven't fought the sweat lords yet, but at least the people that use them in through cooperating, or they personally switch to spears when an invader shows up, and you just say no to that. You
Yeah.
hit him with like a lion's claw, and you plant him face down in the ground. Like it just feels that feels better, more. I was saying this earlier. What was it that this didn't make the best stuff worse? And if anything, it raised the variety of what could work in the moment. And I'm a big fan of that implication. I would want to see more as we figure it all out, test everything out, test every spell, every
Yeah.
setup combination.
I am curious as to if Rust has any input on what's been said so far, or
Oh yeah, sure. I've been on my spiel now.
no, you're okay.
Yeah.
Um, I there's like good sides and bad sides to this whole patch, right? I agree that like the viability of something that's completely fucking dog shit, like again, a single hand axe, it
Colossal
has
weapon.
some place.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think that colossal weapons are any better.
At least with two-handed. So aim punch was strange. Aim punch was changed for two-handed hyper armor moves. I have
Hmm.
been able to land those more consistently than pre-patch. But
I'll grant
if
that.
you're one-handing or dual wielding weapons, it's almost as if aim punch is still kind of there. So this seems like they explicitly, and also giving damage reduction to those
True.
larger weapons is also huge. But
The damage reduction was a
before,
good change.
but like pre-patch, using a colossal weapon, you were using a meme weapon, like to win when colossal
Hmm.
swords were the better pick.
Hmm.
But you could continue.
So the issue that colossal weapons have is that they have little in the way of dealing with a fast weapon that can outspace them, or to whiff punish them. They are very slow with their recovery, and that hasn't changed. Basically, the way that I would approach fighting a colossal weapon is not any different than it was pre-patch. I will
Mm,
pull out an off dagger, and I'll off dagger it to death
sure.
because I can.
Yep.
Um, and that's like none of the hyper armor in the world is going to save that. It can now
Sure.
continue to mash through anything that I do, but that was something that it could do anyway. I could, one-handed great sword into a colossal sword, and it would say nope. And that is still the case. So I don't know that a whole lot has changed in regards to that because the active poise has always been very high on them.
Mm,
Their hyper armor. The decrease in damage taken by them, I think, is a huge plus. I think that is a great change, and will probably give them at least a fighting chance.
yeah.
So in terms of that, as far as what you've been saying, yes, I agree 100%. In terms of how priority works, I don't know, because they're
Mm.
just too slow still.
Could you
But again,
explain a
I'm
bit
coming
more what you
from.
mean by priority in this, and just so that everyone's on the same page, I guess.
There is nothing that a two-handed Uggs can do to apply pressure to someone who's playing reactively
Yeah.
with a smaller weapon that
Mm.
decides that they want to wait for you to fuck up.
Yep. That smacks of what it's been since. Well, I was about to say Dark Souls 3, but really any Souls game has always run into that issue. The bigger the weapon, the
Yeah,
if somebody wanted to just be passive in these games and just roll everything you did, you could. So that's where offhand setups arose. That's where, dagger
right.
this, fist that, off stock, as everyone's been clamoring to do, just because that's easy, it's fast, long range. For sure, this patch was like a good foundational change. Like we just swapped out the rug to the table, but now you
Yeah.
actually need to change what's going on the table, which
Yeah.
is off stock, just having not only like the quartet, right? The damage, range, speed, and tracking when you're locking on.
Yeah.
If From Software could look at those four, and I don't know, get rid of one, maybe tracking needs to go. Especially the fact that off stock apparently has all that poise damage on 2L, like if you hit 2L1s.
Hmm.
That shouldn't obviously that shouldn't be there, but
Is the first hit that has the 100 poise damage?
Wasn't it? I remember hearing
First
an
hit,
Ender
yeah.
stream. It
So
was just the first. I thought it was
So
like
the way
two.
that it works is that it's tied to animations, right?
Mhm.
The funny damage the poise damage modifier. So on first
Yeah.
hit, it more or less does 109, 108, I believe it is. Yeah, it's 108 poise damage. But because it's tied to the animation and the animation chain is the same for the first two moves. You basically get two 108
Yeah.
attacks off of it. Basically, is the idea.
Mhm.
Because it's tied to animation, it's not some weird hit stun calculation that this person is in hit stun, so therefore the next attack is going to, because that would also be very stupid. But
Yeah.
there's no good way to do that. To be honest with you, because now stocks
Mhm.
are just utterly nuts
Mhm.
as it stands right
They're
now.
already bad.
I
I
just remember fighting that host, and I'd still. It's there was this moment, and that you would have seen, that you would have thought, oh, in Dark Souls 3 that would have been a threat, like an advantage for the thrusting sword. So that same host I was fighting at level 40, who busted out the thrusting sword to like attack in between my two-handed greatsword hits, I was able to queue up a second R1 as they were punish whiffing the first, and that I had enough hyper armor to go through and
Yep.
meet their
Yep.
whiff. Whereas in Dark Souls 3, they were like in between poise frames, in between attacks. So if somebody was really good at spacing out and hitting you with like a spear or a thrusting sword back in the day, they would have gotten you two hits for the other person.
Yeah.
They got in, and not this time it seems. I don't like.
I I
Not to
want to
say.
know if Amelia can confirm this or not, but I don't know if the hyper armor window has changed for two-handed greatswords.
Mm,
But it feels really tight, and I don't know if that's always been the case or if I'm just feeling it a lot right now.
You're going to feel it an awful lot right now, irrespective, simply for the fact that they can swing with almost right. They're swinging with reckless abandon now. They're not quite as cautious because player behavior hasn't really reflected the change just yet, which
Exactly.
is why I'm kind of sticking to, we're going to wait a week and we're going to see how people take this.
mhm.
On the surface, it's saying the game ain't doing too hot right now. Um, but we'll just have to see. Again, I was wrong about CGS. I'll probably be wrong about this. I think it's much more sensible to kind of not be knee jerk and kind of chill
Mm,
with how it's going to be. But on the hyper armor stuff, what Russ basically said is that hyper armor right now, I kind of want to echo that. Hyper armor right
mhm.
now, the move sets haven't changed. It's just that the interactions are different, and people are going to have to figure out ways and means of getting around it. But yeah, the switching to dagger and just like swinging into an Uggs
Mhm.
player who's trying to have fun is probably the play there. But I'm curious, is there any other, either of you really, is there any other things that you've noticed that kind of like will give you an indicator as to how it's going to go forward in future patches, or how everything is currently, I suppose. What's the vibe?
Um, I don't know. Like I said, a good foundational change. They still need to be more like be more specific and critical about stuff that is really strong right now, with the obvious like passive poise change that they've already done, and affect things like how powerful thrusting swords are, how
Mhm.
powerful, or even, or go on the flip side of it. Don't just nerf things, but buff. Like earlier, I was trying twin axes, and I assumed for the second that, okay, wait a minute, they increase the poise damage of the first attack you do. For axes, maces, and flails, those two swing independently of each other, not the same like spears and straight swords and curved swords do. So surely, if I swing the first axe that hits them, which comes out decently fast, that will stun people. Turns out the poise damage is on the second axe hit rather than the first. It's a bit odd. It seems like twin axes are still abiding by the passive poise laws a bit, where you only get real big poise damage from the second axe hit. But that move set is far too low. The tracking is far too weak to be like, I was kind of hoping it got like a big stealth buff, and it's not really there. Axes themselves sit in a very weird place where now maces and hammers, especially if you two hand those things, can That smacks
muscle.
of Reinforced Club. Reinforced Club is back, and it's here.
Yeah.
Uh,
Unironically, like seriously.
yeah. But axes are now have almost been left behind in a way. And I would want to see moveset changes to raise the stuff that's still struggling and having trouble, just because they need to be given something more distinct than just being like a side grade or a lesser grade than a straight sword now, because straight swords have that poke, they have good range, good speed.
Fists as
you know,
well are another one actually that have been kind of stealth nerfed in this patch, which is kind of interesting because when you go for the run or one, for example, there's a big pause between the first hit, which does I believe it's 30 poise damage, 25, 30. Oh, some of the wizards in chat will figure that one out for me. But it does reduced amounts of poise damage, so the exact same strategy remains for that, which is half hit with the first, and then you don't even need to trade. Now you can just like R1 into it, and they're kind of like caught with their trousers down. It's kind of sad to see that setup, which had been elevated so heavily, in fact being meta for a little while, now be kind of like relegated into an off-meta trick that you're going to take out every now and again. But the claws have just immediately come back in, so that's going to be to fill that gap. So we've lost one, we've gained another in that respect. So that's claw. If you haven't crag-bladed claws yet, to JM, I would.
Wait! Are claws now on the up and up?
Run R2 R2.
Oh,
Just think about it for a second. They and then mash. Then mash. Obviously.
Then start mashing.
Yeah, it's Bloodborne, dude. Well, we are now playing Bloodborne.
Where do what is it, the fist weapons that poke?
Oh, Katars?
Yeah, Katars and the faith
Pata,
the
Cypher
Cypher
Pata,
Pata.
yeah.
and the Cypher Pata. How are those two
Yeah.
doing?
They're good. They poise break, you know? I mean,
Gotcha.
they're pretty
Start mashing.
pretty
Yeah.
damn good.
Gotcha.
They poise break, and then you can R2, you can R1, whatever you want to do.
It's the
R2s are well
normal
patched.
ones, the Cestus, the Iron and Star Fist. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're the ones that are kind of like de-elevated. They're still strong, like don't get me wrong. They just don't have their aggression now, and their range is so pitiful that it's kind of sad. But I'm sure some entrepreneur might mess around with Cragblade or find other ways, niche uses for them, which I think is unfortunately going to relegate them in fun weapon now rather than something that's actually serious. But yeah, it's kind of a mess right now. We're trying to figure out where they've put all the furniture at the moment, where everything has been removed to, but the building is still kind of ablaze. So
I will say it again. I think that the biggest mistake was the massive boost to the hyper armor values. At least the number that it boosts your poise to. That I think is the mistake. I think that the damage mitigation increase was amazing, but making it to where you can trade indefinitely greatsword into greatsword is so stupid.
That definitely needs to be a winner there,
Yeah.
for sure. Because I remember the days of Dark Souls 3 pre DLC. If you had two poise boys with like what Lothric Knight great swords, and you just started swinging and going into town, nobody would be stunned in that situation. You just keep swinging until somebody falls down, and that's silly. That shouldn't be how that works. There should be a definite winner. If you get the hit first, the other person who is in the middle of swinging should fall. The only time that you should win the exchange is if you bust out a weightier move. An R2 should beat an R1. An Ash of War should beat an R2. Or, well, depending on the Ash of Wars, right? Because all the Ashes of Wars are differently structured and framed. Maybe some R2s should beat some Ashes of War. This is where they would have to go with a scalpel rather than a sledgehammer to Elden Ring's meta system. But
so Josh has a suggestion just before we go on, which I think is quite interesting, and I think we probably bring it to attention. Is hyper armor should start at where it's at, but should lower significantly with each swing. It shouldn't be infinite, and that's actually a pretty good idea. Having deteriorating amounts of hyper armor might deal with that problem, but then you kind of still end up with that full hit. Yeah, exactly. You also end up with that first hit as well, wherein like basically they're just going to slap each other for a bit. That's more or less which is just silly. That's so very silly in every conceivable way. I'm not quite sure what to make of that one. It kind of hurts.
Say, quick, Josh, take that idea, wrap it in a ticket, and send it to Bandai Namco, and they'll send it which way to From Software. Because apparently, sending tickets does turn into something. We have been proved time and time again that making note of like IGN build getting thrown out the window, near and far, being able to invade near and far, that was huge. These things also affecting like the Phantom Bloody Fingers and invasions used to make it to where it would unscale or recalculate the scaling on overpowered phantoms to where they would do full damage to you. That also got fixed. So evidently, there are ways to voice complaints and objections and something like that to where if you say that you're okay with the system as decently okay with the system as is, this could use better curtailing. I think they might actually listen to that, especially if there's like a force behind it. So that's when you get like videos like Russ and Amir, and they're talking about these things in great depth. Then I think that's when the community managers of Bandai Namco see that, and then they relay the information somehow. Because
Yeah, maybe.
however that works, because it's like we have to send smoke signals over to their direction in order to
Go on.
articulate our woes.
Another suggestion here we've had from KJL, which I think is another one that, they're all out today. Hot take, passive poise is fine, but it shouldn't be tied to armor, instead being a universal system. And one of its universal things that could be balanced around how many hits it takes to break instead of arbitrary break points. It could be interesting. I think that might be worth looking into as well, but I'm going to be curious now, because again, we have so many tools now to be able to I mean, of course, Emilia's app is absolutely phenomenal. I'm not sure if you're still there, Sister Amelia, and you want to actually post that. That will be definitely something that's worth checking out. The frame data, the inventory layout manager, all of these things that we have access to. Obviously, the wizards on PC with their cheat engine, being able to look into a whole host of the actual like ins and outs of how things function and being able to test things quickly. It won't be very long until we find the answers to an awful lot of these questions. But if there is anything that's discovered, I'm sure we'll be watching with bated breath. Not bated breaths. So that's a. Hang on a second. That's a end a typo. Typo moment.
Don't let the Coomers hear you.
Well, I mean, it's a Twitch chat, so we have to make assumptions. Assume the worst. But I'm going to be curious now moving forward as to, I know that Ladder, for example, the competitive PvP Ladder, ERPVP Discord, which isn't open, you can look it up on Discord. It's probably going to be a place. They've currently unrestricted anything. If there was anything that you guys could have restricted as of right now in terms of a 1v1 situation, what would it be? And don't say off stock, because that's cheating. Because that definitely needs to go.
What game is off stock not pretty freaking powerful? It's like return to tradition, reject modernity, return to tradition. Off stock once again.
So you can't pick the same thing. Yeah, pike. Yeah.
Single pike or double pike is both pretty stupid right now.
Oh, really?
Shield poking is insane. I think that needs to be put on the table.
Okay.
Because you can poise break on your fisted every single time.
Damn.
So, shield poke away.
Return of the turtle builds. Turtle builds always on the up and up somehow. Always enjoying life. Damn them.
The more that you encounter any kind of deviation towards smaller weapons becoming meta, or people just wanting to try them more right now because small weapons are funny because they have a poise break on their first hit, shield poke will become stronger.
I can imagine the return of the fingerprint.
Spinning slash apparently causing problem. Yes, you cannot roll out of it, even if you're like in neutral and they just decide to spinning slash, then you lose priority because they have hyper armor, and then you get blendered. Spinning slash is an issue.
The Dragon Halberd is pretty. Is something to look out for. The funniest thing though, I remember hearing about Dragon Halberd and like, oh no, if that true combos, that's gonna be
that's where we're at, unfortunately.
And And then I go over to Saint stream really quick, and he hit R2, and it stopped them right dead in their tracks with a colossal sword. And I'm like, oh, okay, wait a minute, hold on.
You say that, but
How powerful.
unfortunately, and you have to keep in mind this though, JM, is like, yeah, you can break them out of it, but now do you really want every build to be forced to have to use that as a means of dealing with a problem? That you're active by forcing the current Elden Ring before this was more or less a rock paper scissors match to some degree, right? This beats this, so I switch to this when this has been taken out, right? At a meta level, that seems to be how people had chosen to engage with the system, which is fine. That's one way of doing it. The other one, though, unfortunately, is that it forces every build to have to be able to have those things, which is going to, because of how these games work, you want to have as many options as you can, and you can do that using the RPG system to do it, right? But that's going to force you to use certain builds as well. So having every build be forced to have that as a prerequisite, in much the same way as Invaders were almost forced to have like BHS and Quickstep in order to avoid certain things. It, in one hand, you might say it encourages variety, but on the other hand, it actually reduces it considerably because there's less player expression. Then it's just counterpick, 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 counterpick. So I don't think that that's a viable way of looking at it, unfortunately.
At least I'm trying to like I said earlier, this patch now focuses more on that the Ash of War emphasis on if somebody's using an Ash of War, what do you have against that? So in particular to the Dragon Halberd, I'd be curious, like, sure, not everyone's going to have a colossal weapon on them, but I'm curious what other Ashes of War somebody could use in that situation to either save themselves from getting hit or defend against it, or maybe even interrupt it with something like Stormblade, or can you quick step around it, even though they make quick step iframes even less now? Can you hit that with even the what was it? Oh man, my name's as the day goes on, my brain starts to fail me. The Raptors missed it, like what's going on there? What's going on with spinning slash? A spinning slash. Can you meet that with one? Is that even something that you want to do? 2 days in, we definitely have to see to what extent, like, can smaller weapons show up with Ashes of War that stop bigger weapons with their Ashes of War? Have to play around with it for sure.
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting time for the next little while to see how this all pans out. I'm kind of interested in. So we've had from the Invader side anyway. JM, you're pretty optimistic about how things are going so far. So far, and Rust then from purely like, I guess like a frame data analysis or from stuff like that, whether how you're looking at it there, it seems to be pretty negative. I would be curious as to how the competitive players are how the competitive players are dealing with it. That's something that I'm.
I think they're fine because they're going to keep on using the things that are good. Power stance spears, power stance straight swords, off stock.
And if they enjoy
Return of
that,
strong stock.
they enjoy it. Yeah.
I mean, like, it's the things that are strong are still strong, and if not stronger, because now PSSS poise breaks on every single hit.
Monkey mashing out of hit stun beyond his retirement. Interesting. But yeah, I'm kind of curious as to how things are going to develop. We've heard spears. Obviously, off stock wants to be a ban, but if you were to construct a rule set right now, either of you, I guess, considering this is a duelist safe space, what would your priority be in terms of like encouraging good play and encouraging something that's fun and engaging? If you were to ban something like a couple of things, like what's the diagnosis?
Honestly, it's too hard to say, to be honest. It's like, again, the obvious is there, but who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
Amelia says this podcast is too doomer pilled. Where are the positives? I've been acting positive this whole time.
Positive.
He's on too positive.
I'm here to say that I'm excited to play this game more. Like, the idea of relearning the game actually intrigues me. Like I want to see what this new landscape looks like and what the potential is future. I'm there.
Yeah, but the issue is of course like From's implementation this time around seems on the surface, again 2 days in, who the fuck knows,
Right.
seems pretty doesn't encourage what I would can be considered a fun play. Yeah, that's definitely something. Lumi, you're not my dad. You're not allowed to say these things. This is not okay. But
I'm
go on, Rust.
I'm gonna play the game. I'm gonna make fun with it.
Hmm.
I will make it be fun because that is what I'm going to do, kind of thing, right? But I can at the same time still be like objectively, I don't like this part, I don't like that part. What are the things I do like about it? Probably not a lot, but am I still gonna play it? Am I still gonna find a way to have fun with it? Yes.
Oh, also, wait, backstabs. Have you been trying to get any of them, Rust?
They're weird, man. I don't even know where to begin with them.
This is still weird to this day. They're still
'Cause
not
they're
Dark Souls 3
no.
backstabs, but there are some moments where I'm like,
Yeah,
oh, I would not have gotten that before. This feels good.
yeah.
This feels right.
I think the line
Or
go on, Rust. No, please, Rust, you go for it.
I've had plenty of situations where it was, wait, I just got backstabbed, huh?
It's like, what?
The general
Got me
vibe
now?
from my perspective is there's never a big fish in these games, but sometimes I dabble. You dabble in a little bit of angling, and the general vibe for me has been that anything that you could get before is just more consistent. But it hasn't really opened up very many new possibilities in what is or isn't backstabbable. You can get away with slightly more on slightly different lat, but it seems to be yeah, the angle check isn't necessarily the problem. It's the means by which things have to rotate.
Yep.
And
Double checking the whole thing.
yeah, I think and any closing thoughts then, gentlemen, before I do wrap up, because I think Lumi is right. It has been 7.5 hours.
Rust, you go first.
Huh? What? Huh?
Or if you have anything else to say.
Have you have anything any closing thoughts so far?
No, I think that's about good.
And as for you,
I
JM?
I do have something to say.
Uh-oh.
I remember Dodd was in here laughing at the seeming destruction of the game. He was vindicated, he said. And I remember seeing some doom and gloom from certain people that had already like given themselves into the passive poise meta from before. And I wasn't exactly enamored by that past meta. I didn't find that as enjoyable as I may have had like Dark Souls 2 fighting or 3 or even Bloodborne, for instance. But with the direction that this is going in now, I was curious what other people were thinking because the other day, you were like again you were streaming, you were in here. There were like 24, maybe 30 people in here sharing similar like worries and anxieties. I wake up today and I go over to like Saints or G9, and these are two players that are entirely different ends of the spectrums of what they get fun out of this game. And suddenly they're both ecstatic and optimistic. Suddenly I hear like Steel is two, and surely when Peeve, who sometimes streams to the tune of 1,000 or 2,000 people whenever he does like his level 200 invasions, he's like, oh wow, all these other people with their passive poise builds got buffed. I don't use poison in any of my builds, he always says. And those people, right? I'm not just talking about the streamers or the streams, but the amount of people that are watching the positivity are going to absorb that. People that are heard that Elden Ring is better, right? Elden Ring got better. These streamers are enjoying it. To those crowds will affect the amount of people that will come back and want to try things out. The playing field, the amount of people that are here will change, especially if there are sales. Like this is a good prep work for it when the DLC comes out and people wonder, how's the game now? Oh, it's better. It's going to turn into like No Man's Sky again, where you probably heard about the game. It was trash at the beginning. There were lies about this, and that, and then suddenly it turned into a game with all these expansions, and it turned into a fun, chill little space game that now Starfield is trying to parody. But now Elden Ring is starting to get in that direction. We're at ground zero, but we're going to see how this develops, especially if people with larger audiences talk positively about it and show their experiences about it. I'm feeling good about it. But what last thing I'll say, the last precautionary tale is this meta could bring about a meta that we could rue this day, and it could be worse than whatever was before, like the bane of our existence. But luckily, we can assume that this is not going to be the last patch. There's still DLC coming out. Hopefully, there are more fixes. We got to let them know if something's broken or too powerful. They could potentially fix it, hopefully. But I'm feeling good. We're on the up and up. We'll see what this is. The negative take is that From will see the positivity and thinks this is good balance. Apparently, well, we'll see, right? We took them a long time to get to the IGN build, but IGN decided to make like a video that reached hundreds of thousands, and cooperators use that willingly until eventually they heard from our tickets from people who actually played the game who hated that, and they got around to fixing it. So it is. We shall see. This too shall pass.
I will echo that very quickly. I think it is very early to say, but again, I'm to bring back to that focus. The main thing I'm concerned with isn't so much what you can do; it's whether you should do it, right? Because you can do anything. You can pick up these games. You can interface with the systems in any way that you want. It's the question of what does the actual meta look like? What are you going to see more frequently than not if you boot up Arena, if you boot up an Invasion? What are you most likely to see? Because those are the things that are going to reflect whether or not it reflects what good or isn't good in the game. Because every setup could be reasonable, but if everyone decides to on a whim pick up the most strong possible thing and it's unfun to fight against, now you're fucked.
People agree what's going on in the chat right now, though.
Sorry?
I agree what's going on in the chat, though.
1.9 balance is the best it's been, but off meta, so yeah, maybe.
Yeah, the repost from that.
That's more fun than it has before. Is in the gutter. Yeah, off meta at least feels better now, and that's something to keep in mind as well. You're going to have a shake up every patch. Some people who prefer the previous meta are going to boogie on out and find warmer pastures, warmer climes. But as it stands right now, we're like deer in the headlights trying to figure out what's going to happen here. My outlook isn't positive given the things that I've seen so far with the dominance of certain setups. You will fight a gank, everyone has an off stock. What do you do? I think Sever is probably the best option, or hope that they're terrible. And unfortunately, that's pretty much how it's going to be. Same with pikes, same with everything. Before you had options. There weren't good options, but there were options. Now it looks like there's very few options available to you against competent players that are going to lead to huge success. That is, it doesn't involve you knowledge checking them to death because you assume that the other person is going to be good. Remains to be seen how that's going to pan out, what actually turns out to be the meta. But on that note, from myself, the wonderful DangitJM, who you can see on Twitch and YouTube, and the wonderful Rust Bucket, who you can see from Twitch and YouTube. Love and appreciate you all, folks. And we're going to find someplace cozy to send you all.